Why has Marc Jacobs fallen in popularity? The brand Marc Jacobs is probably most known to the masses for its sweet-smelling perfumes, its take on trends, and notable advertising campaigns. Marc Jacobs clothing is the accompanying fashion line and is an LVMH brand. Initially launched in the 80s, Marc Jacobs initially saw remarkable success, buoyed by the popularity of the designer by the same name. However, in 2018, the New York Times wrote a piece spelling out how Marc Jacobs had fallen out of fashion. But 5 years later, is this still the case? Born in New York in the early 1960s, Marc Jacobs had a strong talent and passion for design. He learnt how to knit from his grandmother, who encouraged him to pursue his love of design. He studied at the High School of Art and Design whilst working at the upscale clothing boutique Charivari, where he met the fashion designer Perry Ellis, who became his mentor. Following high school, Marc Jacobs enrolled at Parsons School of Design. For his graduation project, he designed a collection of hand-knit sweaters, which earned him some of the school's highest honours. He subsequently sold the collection to Charivari, the boutique where he worked at whilst in high school. Over the coming years, he collaborated with a series of designers and manufacturers to launch collections, before securing financial backing to launch his own collection in 1984, for which he became the youngest designer ever to win the Council of Fashion Designers of America Perry Ellis Award for New Fashion Talent, one of the fashion industry's highest honours. Marc Jacobs then debuted his Grunge Collection as Vice President of Women's Wear at Perry Ellis. The collection was credited with defining the grunge look of the 90s. For the grunge designs shown by models including Kate Moss, Marc Jacobs won the CFDA Women's Wear Designer of the Year Award in 1992. Despite the success of the line, Marc Jacobs' role at Perry Ellis promptly ended, reportedly because his grunge line was too much of a radical departure from the brand's traditional clean-cut aesthetic. In 1997, Marc Jacobs was appointed as creative director of Louis Vuitton. Marc Jacobs revitalised the Louis Vuitton brand by creating Louis Vuitton's first ready-to-wear line for men and women.
Someone who really loves to indulge her whims and who really, luxury to her is just that. It's happy and positive and feminine and sexy and contemporary.
He also introduced Louis Vuitton's first line of jewellery and watches, as well as introduced collaborations across many of Louis Vuitton's collections and expanding Louis Vuitton stores around the world. He was a champion of the Speedy bag, which was initially launched in 1930, and created a graffiti version in collaboration with Steven Sprouse in 2001.
The heritage of Louis Vuitton is travel, and it's really traveling with a monogram bag. So it's a big part of the heritage, and it's something we always like to play with.
Whilst at Louis Vuitton, Marc continued to work on his own brand and launched the sportswear line Marc by Marc Jacobs in the early 2000s. In 2013, Marc Jacobs left Louis Vuitton after 16 years at the brand to focus on his own brand full-time. In that year, he launched the makeup line Marc Jacobs Beauty. However, his fashion empire, rather than flourish, began to struggle. In 2015, he closed the once popular Marc by Marc Jacobs brand and added lower-priced items to his signature collection. In addition, a number of his retail stores around the world were closed amid job losses and upper management, including CEO turnover. In 2016, Marc Jacobs faced widespread backlash and controversy when he sent models in his Spring 2017 collection on the runway in hand-dyed wool dreadlocks. The look incited an immediate discussion about whether or not the hairstyle was an offensive form of cultural appropriation or whether it was a show of appreciation for the hairstyle. Marc Jacobs later apologised for his insensitivity and reaction to the initial backlash. Was Marc Jacobs looking for a viral and controversial moment to buoy interest in his brand? This led to the New York Times writing a blistering piece in 2018 titled "How Marc Jacobs Fell Out of Fashion," describing the fall in the brand's popularity in the fashion industry and fall in profitability. Although Marc Jacobs was still winning awards, the publication questioned the brand's actual relevance and influence in the fashion industry and noted a reported loss of $50 million annually and stagnant revenue. In recent years, Marc Jacobs has been restructured to reduce its runway collection whilst developing a mid-tier line and continuing Marc Jacobs Beauty. Sales for the company have improved and there are plans to open new stores over the coming years. Marc Jacobs is clearly a talented designer and has had lots of success and critical acclaim over the years. However, being at Louis Vuitton for 16 years may have been a big factor as to the fate of Marc Jacobs as the brand today. As at Louis Vuitton, he would have been accustomed to a very well-oiled corporate machine and a legacy fashion house, whereas his brand would have faced different challenges that he may not have foreseen, and his brand would have had to compete with the other legacy brands like Chanel and Gucci and Louis Vuitton, as well as newer and emerging brands at the time such as Supreme. Therefore, some of his ideas and vision for his brand, which may have worked for Louis Vuitton because it already had such a huge following and the brand was already so well known and established, may not have worked as well for his own line. Although he did have his Marc Jacobs line alongside Louis Vuitton, I do think it was perhaps less well known, and I think the one key takeaway is to always work on your own brand, which will allow you to inevitably pivot as needed and try different ventures, as opposed to being so closely tethered to a brand, particularly if you do not own that brand. Do you think that Marc Jacobs will bounce back in terms of popularity and relevance in the fashion industry, or do you think that it's too much of a challenge for the brand? Let me know your thoughts down below. This is Bookstore Business. Drink in the knowledge.